And we are at 4:01, so I will take off our welcome screen. Good afternoon, Mavericks, and everyone else joining us today. Welcome to our third UNO Young Alumni Professional Series webinar. My name is Anthony Flott, and I am the Interim Executive Director of the UNO Alumni Association. 3 quick notes before we get started. If anyone in attendance this afternoon would like us to send them a free UNO alumni pin, just reply to the email that you received from us earlier today confirming your registration for the webinar, and we will mail that to you soon. Secondly, we will be conducting 2 random prize drawings at the end of our webinar for those who are still with us, so we're excited about that. And finally, if you have questions for our guests today, and I'm guessing you will because this is a great topic, please include those in the chat box and we'll monitor those and try to get to those later after our guest presentation. So with that out of the way, it is my extreme pleasure to introduce one of the bravest and one of the kindest people I know, and I mean that sincerely, Nicole Bianchi. Nicole is a founding partner at Bravium HD, where she is a professional speaker, a facilitator, and ICF executive coach who leads leadership, team alignment, and culture building workshops. Before Bravium, she was a human resource and organizational development executive, leading transformation with Conagra and Markel Insurance. Now she spreads what I like to call the Bible of Bravery through presentations, and now as a published author. She's also a UNO graduate, and she's a friend. Well, that's most important to me. I've had the great pleasure of getting to know Nicole while our sons played football together in high school for 4 years. Now today, Nicole will discuss the question, what is the bravest thing you need to do right now? With that, welcome, Nicole, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so very much. It's great to see a few familiar faces on the attendee list. Bianca, and I see Courtney Kopatz. Courtney has already purchased my book and she'll be coming to my book launch party next week to get it. So I'm really excited. So thanks for joining. And I see there's more jumping on right now that are jumping on and joining us as well. So welcome. We're going to spend a little time talking bravery and what's that bravest move that we could make in our leadership journey. And so with that, I want to kick off with a story and share a little bit about a time I was being interviewed for a new leadership role. And in that interview, I was told, Nicole, if you cannot fix this area that you're responsible for, we'll actually outsource the whole thing. Now, think about that for a minute. Outsource it? I was like, whoa, how is this possible? But it was risky and I was up for the challenge. And you know what else is risky? Getting braces later on in life. You see these teeth? I mean, they're nice teeth, right? Well, it took 2 rounds of braces to get there, but more on that in a minute. So fast forward about a month later, I'm at a meeting with the CEO over a fancy meeting, actually in downtown Omaha at a nice steakhouse, to present my 90-day plan, because I really want to get aligned and clear on what my plan is to turn around this area. So we are now outsourcing it. Well, we're both having salads, and at this steakhouse, we're both having salads. We finish our meal, and for about an hour, I'm sharing my 90-day plan. CEO stands up at the end, tells me, great job, gives me a high five, says, Nicole, this is exactly what we need. So I'm excited, right? This is great news. And I'm walking back to my office from downtown up to my office, and I'm going through the rows of cubicles back to my office, and I'm checking in. How are we doing on that vice president of sales role? How was your child's championship soccer game? They won? Great. So multiple conversations, and I walk back into my office and I'm in front of my computer screen, and all of a sudden I hear the loudest bing, which tells me I have a new instant message. Well, in that message, it read, Nicole, you may want to go check your braces. I think you have something in them. Now, I did not have a mirror in my office. And so I run down the hall, walk briskly down the hall into the bathroom, and I am looking in that large mirror. And what is staring back at me is not just a piece of lettuce stuck in my braces, but it is now a green, almost like a mouth guard, a green bracket that is covering the entire front row of my braces. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, let me replay the events here for just a moment. Lunch, right? They clear away lunch, hour long reviewing the 90-day plan, walking back to my, wait. For 1 hour, the CEO sat there and looked at me with a straight face, listening to my plan, saying nothing, nada zilch about this lettuce in my braces. So as I'm carefully peeling off this, again, it looks like a mouth guard. It's unimaginable. And that bright, beautiful green lettuce I had at lunch is this dark, gross green piece. So I pull it out and I think to myself, do I say something or do I let it go? And in that moment, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I have to be brave for the CEO to be brave. So I want to first talk braveryisms. The expectation is that we're brave, right? It's the big brave. It's with the cape. We come flying in to save the day. But not all moments require that big brave, yet we think they do. And not everybody is really ready for that big brave. So we protect ourselves with a cape, maybe a mask, and we think to ourselves, we often are not our best selves in those moments. And so when we think about, sorry, my things are going too fast here. When we think about bravery, we can't help but picture someone with a cape coming to save the day. Someone that has those brave feats that are being performed like firefighters, police officers, doctors, right, to resolve a crisis. But the idea of being able to tap into this type of immeasurable courage is foreign to most of us, right? We have not been trained for those moments. And braveryism set unrealistic expectations. So when the crisis comes, those heroes are ready to stand up and confront the situation. And we simply can't relate because we aren't putting on our lives on the line in our leadership roles necessarily. So the interesting thing to think about is, well, then what kind of bravery is there for the rest of us? Well, in the work I've done with leaders inside and outside of organizations, if I were to boil all the challenges down to one common element, it would be bravery or lack thereof, just like my CEO. Some say you're born with it or you're not, and that is absolutely false. Bravery is actually an acquired behavior, and bravery takes practice. So when you're working hard at mastering a skill, a sport, an instrument, something new, what do? We practice. Now, leadership development has been primarily focused on acquiring more tools like coaching, feedback, presentation skills, and those are important. That's a big part of the work that we do, is developing leaders, transforming leaders, building skills. But it's not enough. And again, the reason why it's the common missing element is because we have this big spotlight on leading, the lead part of leadership. And actually, what about if we just we shifted the spotlight just a little bit, and it was a focus on becoming a braver version of our leadership selves, hence bravership. So this is a term I've coined a couple of years ago because I found in the research that I did that leaders who live a life of bravership can actually grow influence. They actually accomplish so much more, and they fear less because they're actually able to manage the fears that they have going on in their system. And the truth is we've been taught not to be brave and to conform, to give in, to play it safe. Now, culture and environment play a role in this as well. But I want you to think about for just a moment, what gets in the way of living a life of bravership? And it's fear. And there's actually two types of fear. So there's that inherent fear. It's intuitive, it's linked to survival. So a snake's coming up on you, what do I do, right? We get that. That's a being bit by a snake is bad, right? It could lead to death. The other kind of fear, though, is learned. And learned fear is irrational, and it actually develops over time. But wait, those can be relearned. And so I want to explore three of them. So when I looked at across all of the leaders I coach in leadership development, strategy sessions, inside and outside of organizations, I noticed that there's three types of fear that come up regularly. I'm going to walk you through each one. The first one, and as I walk you through these, I'm going to ask you questions. I want you to blow up that chat. I want to hear from you and see how some of these land for you. So the first one is the fear of not being perfect, not good enough, or not having it right, okay? So many of you probably have heard of Clance and Imes' work in the imposter syndrome area. It was first coined by them in 1978. And it's a psychological pattern in which we doubt our accomplishments, right? And we have that persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. So give me a thumbs up or raise your hand. I think that's the only reaction we have right now is raise your hand. Raise your hand for me if you have experienced that before. Research shows that it actually impacts men and women equally. But what's interesting is most often people talk to women about it. So I want you to take a look at who has reported experiencing it. First is Sheryl Sandberg. So she is the COO of Facebook, right? 2 best-selling books. She's ranked 5th out of 50 of the most powerful women in business by Fortune magazine. How could she possibly be experiencing this? She has it all together, right? Tom Hanks. Who does not love Tom Hanks? Actor, filmmaker, he's the 5th highest grossing actor in North America. He experiences it regularly. And yours truly, I do. Take a look, 70% of people feel like this at one point or another. But I fight imposter syndrome on a regular basis. I deal with it regularly. I wanted to start my own company. This was about 9 years ago. And I had talked on and off about it for several years. But the fear of not being perfect, not being good enough, or not having it all right was getting in my way. And on top of my own negative self-talk, I was told by other leaders, oh, that won't work. You won't be successful. Omaha only uses 1 or 2 consultants. Like, it's too hard to get in. You don't want to mess there. And then one day, a colleague asked me a few powerful questions. And here's what they asked me. 1, Nicole, what's getting in the way of you starting that business that you keep talking about? And I said, gosh, I just don't have it all figured out. Like, I'm not quite sure all of my offerings, things like that. The second question, well, what's the worst that could happen? And I paused and I said, well, I'm not successful. And then they asked me, okay, so could you go find another job? Let's say this doesn't work. You fail completely. Could you go get another job? And I said, well, yeah. And their final question was, so why won't you? And that conversation, we moved into action, like what would be an immediate next step for me? That conversation lifted this weight that I placed on myself of having it perfect, having everything all figured out. And instead, I took a lens of how could I experiment with this? What could that look like? So when we think about, limiting beliefs or the imposter syndrome, we need to figure out how to challenge those limiting beliefs because they are just stories that we tell ourselves. They're our own personal narrative. I'll tell you real quick, the book, Anthony shared, well, Nicole's an author. I have 700 books coming from pre-sales that are a week past due from the publisher. And I am having a book launch party next Wednesday, and they are still not here, which means I have not received them, I haven't autographed them, and I'm nervous about them not being here. And so I called my business partner last night, and I'm panicking. I'm short of breath. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, you can't have a book launch party without books, right? And he said, flip the story. What could, and he started asking me these powerful questions to change the narrative, to change what the story could be like and what are the possibilities. And again, it helped me refocus and rethink because I want the book launch party to be perfect. I want everyone to enjoy it. And I feel like you have to have a book for a book launch party. So, has anyone seen the movie Tag? I love this scene. What I love about the movie is it's these friends, right, who play this game of tag, and that's what actually keeps them together through their adult years. It's a great movie. There's a scene where Bob Callahan, who's the chief executive officer of a business, is getting ready to walk into a big meeting with the Wall Street Journal. And you can see he's nervous. And as he's walking into the meeting, he says to himself out loud, he's by himself, "All right, Bob, you are the CEO of a Fortune 800 company. You've commanded the respect of coworkers and vendors alike. And this is why you're being interviewed by the big boys, the Wall Street Journal." It was his way of getting his butterflies in formation, right? And to calm his nerves and that negative self-talk, and to remind himself, here's why you're here. Here's why you deserve to talk to the Wall Street Journal. It's a great example of affirmation statements, which is one way we can approach them, reminding ourselves of our own accomplishments and how we got here to fight off those limiting beliefs. So I want you to think about your deep-seated beliefs, right? About criteria for success, and look for facts and examples to test whether that criteria is actually valid. So I want you to think about right now, what's one thing you need to give yourself permission to do? What might be one thing you need to give yourself permission to do? And if you would, blow up the chat for me. I'd love to hear from, if you were to sit here thinking here right now, the fear of not being perfect, what's one thing you might want to give yourself permission to do? I'll come back to that in just a minute. The second one is the fear of loss. And this can show up in so many different ways. And it can actually stop us dead in our tracks from being brave. So fear of losing a loved one, a job, it could be an important customer, it could be a project, it could be anything. I remembered fearing losing my dad. He was diagnosed with cancer one day, very abruptly. We had no notice and we were ill-equipped for the journey. And I didn't face my fear. In fact, we pretended everything was okay, and it wasn't. Well, I lost him just a short 6 months later. But years later, I got a second chance. This time it was cancer again, but this time it was my mom. She was diagnosed with late stage 4 lung cancer, which had metastasized to her bones. There was no cure. And oops, it's going the wrong way again on me. PowerPoint does not want to go work with me today. There was no cure, and doctors had given her just 2 months. And I knew I was not going to screw this up again. So what did I do? I put on my cape as the brave daughter, or what I thought bravery was, off to advocate and fight for her every step of the way. Well, 2 months turned into 2 years. And much of those 2 years, I was in warrior mode. And it wasn't until we transitioned her to hospice where it hit me. The fight was actually over. And the true bravest moments actually lay ahead of me at this point in time. You see, I had to transition from warrior mode to being an end-of-life caregiver. And for 22 days in hospice, she would be my masterful guide and I the student, practicing being brave. One afternoon, I remember she woke up and she said, "Nicole," very abruptly, "grab my pen and paper. We have to plan my funeral." And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like this is one of the moments that I was dreading. And we run through the list. Church, check. Pastor, check. What are we going to do afterwards? The luncheon, check. And then she said, the eulogy. You are the one that has to do the eulogy. You're the only one who can do it. You see, I sat there and I said, okay, we're planning your funeral, and now you expect me to do your eulogy? And I sat and I paused and in silence for just a few moments. And there had been something that I'd been hesitating to ask her. I wasn't brave enough. So I did. I thought, I'll barter. I'll go ahead and do that. And I said, I'll agree to do your eulogy if you'll agree that I could be there during your final breaths. She was shocked and she said, well, I can't control that. And I said, oh, I think you can. I think you can. You see, I didn't want her to protect me as she had her entire life. And she knew the final moments would be the toughest for her and for me. And I wanted her to know that I would be there for her. So just 8 days later, I held her as she took her last breath, as promised. And just days later, I delivered a eulogy in honor of her that filled the room with laughter, tears, and pure celebration. I realized it took bravery to not just go through the motions of caring for her, but to go so much deeper, which I hadn't with my father. I couldn't let the fear of losing her stop me from being brave. And during one of our final conversations, she said, I'll always be with you. And as I held her hand, I said, how? And she said, I want you to look for butterflies, purple butterflies. Not all losses are so extreme, yet they're important to us. Another fear of loss might be losing our role or losing our job, right? In fact, I was just on a call today with a group of executive diversity inclusion leaders. It's actually a group that I lead every month. And you know what the number one fear that was coming up for them in that moment? These are chief diversity officers. The number one fear is if I'm too bold, I will get fired. They had just fired the chief diversity officer at Coca-Cola for being too bold with the diversity strategy. So this is real, whether you're a new leader or all the way up to the executive level. 1/4 of working Americans believe it's very likely or fairly likely that they will lose their job or be laid off in the next 12 months, according to a Gallup poll, which is actually a 17% point swing in 1 year. It's interesting. And so one role I want to share with you real quick is when we had just been acquired by another company, the CFO said to me, Nicole, we are the Red Bull in their mint julep. And this was our chief financial officer. He was referencing the merger between First Comp with Markel Insurance Company. This was my last role inside before starting my own business. And I was the head of HR, and I was on the forefront of the merger, handling all of the people and culture integration. The challenge was that the acquiring company's human resources team proudly claimed to have systems and processes from the 1980s. Now, this was a badge of pride for them. So what's the problem, right? I mean, I love the 80s. Well, the problem is we had to unwire all of our technology and move to paper format, which was a massive move and not in a time where really anybody was using paper for a lot of their HR systems. Fear of loss had me holding such a tight grip. And after about 12 months of traveling every other week to Richmond, Virginia, and hitting my head against a brick wall, or it felt like, someone bravely said to me, you know, Nicole, you are really miserable to be around right now. Think about that for a minute. Now, I'll tell you, this person that told me that loves me dearly and I love them dearly, okay? But I was too busy driving change or trying to drive change unsuccessfully that I didn't realize I had fallen out of sync with who I was and what my role was. I was so scared of losing everything we had built and worked so hard for. I didn't want to be a transactional site for our larger company. And I realized at that moment I had a choice. And that choice was fix my situation or move on. So I want you to think about one thing you might be fearing losing right now. Think about what might you be holding a tight grip on. Could it be, and I'd love you to jump into the chat here with me. Could it be going back into the workplace full time? That's one I'm hearing a lot right now. Or the implications, another one that came up loud today was in actually my DEI forum was the implications of having part of our teams at work and at home. And there's a real fear around that. So I'd love to hear from you in the chat. And I'm taking a look at the permissions. Oh, Courtney, this is great. I'd love to give permission to be in the learning mode instead of expecting to be the expert. Nice. To make mistakes and learn from them. Good. Yes. To accept unexpected change. Yeah. So take a moment, throw some stuff into the chat here while I tell you another story around. Again, the question is, think of one thing that you might be fearing losing, or what is something you're holding a tight grip on right now? So in a recent interview that I had with Danielle Kurgan, she's the Chief Transformation Officer at Macy's. They had been hit hard in a pandemic. They were surrounded by pressure. She was surrounded by pressure and feeling completely lonely. She had to furlough 100,000 employees that were deemed non-essential by the government. She had to go to their workforce and tell them for the next 12, 15, they weren't sure how many weeks that they would no longer be receiving a paycheck from Macy's. Think about that. She shared she was so overwhelmed. She felt alone and she didn't know how to make some of those decisions right. In that moment, she felt paralyzed and was just overwhelmed with the complexity. And she said, I leaned into one important habit, and that was writing it out. She says, I ask myself when I know I get into this mode and I feel this way, right? Because there's this fear going on. I answer these questions. What is the situation? What's the worst that could happen if we screw this up? How can we take care of others? And how do we meet people where they're at? So I want to repeat those one more time because I think they're powerful questions. She's a big conceptual leader, so she loves whiteboarding this. You could journal it. You could ask yourself this in a lot of different ways. Again, what's the situation? What's the worst that could happen if we screw this up? How can we take care of others? And how do we meet people where they are? And so anxiety is powerful because it can feel like we're out of control, right? It can send us into thoughts and spirals and all sorts of things. And so I want you to think about, what are you scared of losing, right? What's the worst that could happen as you're working through some of those things? Oh, nice, Anthony. I've written the first 4 chapters of a fiction book. I want to finish it, but doing so would be, I would fear it would not get cut published. And if I did, people would hate it. Oh my gosh, that is real for me right now. Thank you. I want to hear more about this 4 chapters of a fiction book though. Yeah, I'll tell you, the publisher, it's so interesting that he said that, because surrounding yourself with people who can help you through those are so powerful. One of the chapters in my book talks about the circle and how you need to curate, or really be very particular about the circle that you curate, so that they can be there for you in those moments. Definitely. I love that. So the third one that I want to talk about is fear of change or moving on. So this is where we get outside of our protection. And most people actually prefer the status quo. Oops. There we go. Most people prefer the status quo. In fact, 60% of the people do not want to leave their comfort zones, or only do so just occasionally. Like, it's just not something they're interested in doing. So I was working on a case study looking at bravery from 2 perspectives. Bravery in front of us. So what's the bravest thing I could do right now? And then bravery behind us. So what brave moments have you had recently? So I just walked into the door from a business trip, anxious to try out my new questions. And my poor children, all 3 of them get to be my guinea pigs on a regular basis, whether they know it or not. And so I want you to meet Joe. This is who Anthony referenced in the beginning. So he is not just a football player, he's also a lacrosse player. And I asked him, he was right in front of me. I said, Joe, I've got to ask you a question. And I really wasn't expecting much back, because I just thought, well, I'm just going to try it. And I said, Joe, what's the bravest thing you did today? And without a beat, because again, I wanted to test it out, he says, Mom, I played goalie at my lacrosse game. No one else wanted to do it. I didn't either. And in the words of a 16-year-old, he said to me, Mom, I didn't want to get my nuts racked. So this gives you an idea of where his mindset was at as a 16-year-old. He said, I did it for the team so that we can have the best chance to win and compete. And he said, it turns out I'm not a bad goalie. And I learned so much from that goalie's point of view. And he said, Mom, it is so much harder than it looks. And I think that goalie might be the biggest leader on the field. Now, what was powerful about this moment is Joe most of the time plays face-off, which is the first initial one where you have to fight for the ball so that you can get possession and have a chance to score. He thought his position was the most important one. And playing that role opened up his perspective and his mind to so many other things. So while everybody was sitting there, again, fear of change, fear of playing a different role, right, on the team, what the implications could be, it actually opened up his mind to so much more. So I want you in the chat, I'd love to hear from you. What is the bravest thing you've done today, or even in this last week, this last month? And I want you to think of an inspirational story and how you faced difficulty and found your way through it. And just the simple act of saying no to something or yes to something is a small, brave move that I'm talking about. I'm going to give you a minute to jot that in the chat as I share just a bit more. Practicing small, brave moves is the compound interest of self-improvement and growing as a leader. The same way that money multiplies through compound interest, the effects of your small, brave moves multiply as you repeat them. Again, practice. We sometimes dismiss small changes because we feel like they don't equal big wins for us. Transformation takes time, and we have to be patient with that. And especially many of you are so early on in your career that have joined us today. And making those small, brave new moves now will actually multiply your leadership success, one small, brave move at a time. Oh, Eva's on. Yes, I love Eva. Oh, it's so good to see you. Well, not see you, but see your chat. Eva, I love that she's sharing, left a comfortable job to challenge herself to continue growing. I am just so proud of you for doing that. That was definitely a small, brave move, maybe a little bigger than a small, brave move. But I know you made multiple small, brave moves leading up to that moment because I'm aware of that, and I'm so proud of you. Okay. I'll see if any other ones come in. But I want you just to think about that, right? Like, what's a small, brave move that you've made in the last day, week? One that should be celebrated, right? To take a moment. So let's head back to the embarrassing lettuce in the braces saga. I'm going to see if my PowerPoint's going to, it's not. Well, we're just going to leave it here for now. We'll skip the PowerPoint part. So back to the embarrassing lettuce in the braces saga, okay? So remember, do I say something or do I let it go? I want you to think about what would you do in that moment? Well, it's 3 weeks later, and I've flown to another regional office of ours in Rhode Island. And of course, I'm flying in the afternoon, and guess where I have to meet the CEO? That's right, it's dinner, yet another meal with these braces. And before I opened the door to the restaurant, I looked at that reflection in the mirror and in the door, and I told myself, don't puff up, don't shrink, just stand your sacred ground. One of Brené Brown's mantras. And it was time to lean into the discomfort, not run from it. So I walked in and we sat down, we ordered a glass of wine, we're having a couple of nice appetizers. And I asked the question, hey, can I ask you something that you may or may not have seen? And he said, oh, sure. And I said, listen, when we were having our 90-day conversation just 3 weeks ago, remember we had the salads, we moved on to the 90-day plan. Did you happen to see anything in I couldn't get the rest of the sentence out. He turned bright red and looked right down. And I said, oh boy. So the old Nicole would have let him off the hook. I would have made excuses for him. I would have felt bad. I would have felt uncomfortable. Like, oh, I get it. I know that's, not easy to do. And I would have filled the air with nonsense. And instead, I trusted silence. And I said, after a few moments, that must have been really hard for you to see. And he said, Nicole, I'm just not good at that. The whole stain on your shirt, I'm just not that person. And I paused and I said, okay, how will I know that you will be able to give me honest feedback, just in time feedback, if you're not able to tell me something so trivial as I've got a piece of lettuce in my braces? And he paused and he goes, that's fair. That's fair. I said, listen, it's a turnaround situation. You have told me if I'm not able to turn this around, we are going to outsource this. But if I can't get that feedback, and that evening over dinner, we ended up laying out agreements for us both to be successful in our roles. Here's what I needed from you. Here's what he needed from me. That small, brave move enabled us to open up such a powerful dialogue and shift our relationship into a much deeper level because we were aligned on what needed to happen. He ended up being one of the best leaders I ever worked for. And it wasn't because he was some great leader and he had this all figured out. That wasn't it at all. It's because we were clear on our agreements on how to work best together, which developed a deep level of trust. I no longer feared that he would not be willing to give me that feedback. You see, we have a choice. It's really a defining moment for you, for me, for all of us, right? When we have those anxiety or things going on inside of us and we think, gosh, what's that next small brave move I could make? And it's a moment you can ask yourself, what's the bravest thing that you could do right now? What's the bravest thing you could do right now in this moment? What's one small brave move you could make to move forward in a forward motion? Because I do believe for us as leaders, we can live a life of bravership, that we can be braver leaders. We can grow influence, we can accomplish more, and we can fear less because we're so much more in tune with it. And we're working through ways to deal with that. One small brave move can make all of the difference. So I just want to say thank you so much. I do want to offer, I know Anthony's going to open it up to Q&A here in just a moment, but I do want to offer you a copy of the book if you're interested. So you can head out to my website if you are interested in learning more about small brave moves. There's a discount code that'll take it down to, I think, $15 and some change, no shipping. It's $19.99 on Amazon. And you can use the Be Brave code. I will sign the copy for you and throw some bonus items in there as well. So as you know, the books are coming tomorrow. So we'll be working on shipping them throughout the weekend, with the exception of people that are coming to the Omaha book launch party. So I just want to offer that up as well. Again, Be Brave. You can head out to NicoleMBianchi.com. You're more than welcome to get them on Amazon as well. That's another great place to find them. And if you're in the Omaha, well, you all are in the Omaha area, the Bookworm has them as well. So they've got about 15 copies, and I snuck in there a couple of days ago and autographed them as well. So if you want to support a local bookstore, Bookworm is just near and dear to my heart. So I just wanted to let you know that as well. So Anthony, back to you.
Yes. So Nicole, I mentioned that we were friends first. So this is my first real exposure to you professionally, and I'm blown away. What an awesome presentation. Really, really inspiring stuff. And before I ask a question of you, I want to make sure and ask our panelists to please put some questions into that chat for Nicole. Be brave. Be brave. Put your question in there, no matter what it is or how embarrassing you might think it is to you. Put that question in there. Nicole's going to get to these. While our participants are thinking of that, I do want to ask you, what you've asked us, what is the bravest thing we did today or in the recent few days? And you mentioned some brave moments in your life, but is there one or two of the bravest things you've ever done in your life? It could be professional, it could be personal, it could be both.
Yeah. Oh, Okay, that's a hard question. That's a really hard question. That's probably going to evoke a little bit of emotion. I'll tell you, one that comes to mind right away for me is I shared the story about my mom. And that story is pivotal because that's how the book was born originally. It was originally born as I wanted to share a story about hope and how the brave move she made during her cancer journey. Then I realized that coupled with leadership was a pretty powerful book. So it's more than just a business leadership book. That being said, when she was diagnosed in 2012, was the year I started my business. And through that 2-year journey, I was trying to build a business and very, very hard. When about a week before she went into hospice, I knew we were close to the end. And I had business trips lined up. I was going to be traveling for weeks. And I had to go into a room and really think to myself if I was going to be able to leave her and what I would do and what hospice would look like and some bigger decisions, because I knew she was about ready to make that call where she was going to say, I'm done. I was anticipating it. So I actually one day sat down, remember, it's only year 2 of my business. I'm trying to establish myself still. And I've got a lot of really new clients. And I made a phone call to each and every client, letting them know that I would not be able to fulfill my responsibility, that we'd have to postpone the session or the meeting or whatever it was. And that I would really hope that, in a short period of time, I'd be able to be back to them. But I really didn't, I was a solopreneur. I didn't have a backup plan. There wasn't like I could just hand it off to somebody else. And I left, and I literally, as I walked out of my office, I thought that was my brave move. And I was like, I may not have a business to come back to. Like, that's the real truth. That's the hard truth. But I knew that I didn't want to miss out on any moments with her. Well, it ended up being about 6 weeks between that point in time and hospice and the funeral. Probably about 8 weeks when I called my clients back. Not too long, just a couple of months. And surprisingly enough, each one of them said, oh, we've been waiting. We're so excited. Welcomed me back with opening arms. And again, in the consulting world, it's not uncommon for them to move on and go to somebody else. It just happens. And so that my big brave move was putting my business on hold, not knowing when I'd be able to go back to it, and just looking at my husband going, can we somehow make this work? Because this is what I need to do. And him saying, absolutely. So that's one. That's a personal one. I'll tell you a professional one. I was given a responsibility at one time in my career, bigger than HR, where I was purchasing and facilities as well. And the purchasing side, the purchasing manager came to me one day and told me that the CEO had been signing the expense reports for the CRO, the chief risk officer, and the chief risk officer was signing the expense reports of the CEO. So anybody that's in business knows that that's a big no-no, like you don't do that. And shared with me that there were some expense reports I probably needed to see. So the brave move I made was going to the CEO and having a tough conversation around not just the signing of it, but also what lied within the expense reports. And I was told that if I wanted to keep my job, I needed to never ask that question again. And that was powerful. So the brave move comes even just like a month or 2 later when the acquiring company ended up, we moved forward, and that ended up coming out. And it was just that was really hard to navigate, a really tough situation when you know what needs to be done and the people aren't willing to do it, to do the right thing, even when you're giving them a chance to do the right thing. So that would be another one. And then the final one, the third one, I'm going to throw a 3 in because it's got to be 3, writing this book. So Anthony, I applaud you for writing these chapters. Writing a book by far was one of the bravest moves I've ever done, because you are pouring your heart and soul into something that people may or may not love. And it's personal, right? So it's hard to go, oh, well, you didn't, you know what I mean? It's just tough. You're putting your whole heart out there. So.
Absolutely. We do have a question from Michelle Carlson, and she asks, what are small, brave moves you do to take care of yourself?
Good question, Michelle. Michelle, I have to be fully transparent with you on this one. I am not as good as I would love to be on this. My nature is I put everybody above myself. So I'll tell you, there's some practices I have that I do to take care of myself, but I I'm quick when things get tough to not always lean into them. So I do exercise. I love swimming. Anthony knows this. I actually experienced total knee replacement in the last year and a half, both of them. So swimming is an incredible way to take care of myself mentally and physically. And I draw a ton of energy from it. I'm doing a better job of carving out time for moments like that. And each day doing a little bit of something that really fills my cup, I would say. But I'll tell you, it's been tough the last few weeks getting this book out the door and getting it to the publisher and everything. So I'm a work in progress. I wish I had a better magical answer for you on that one, Michelle, but it's the truth and it's real and it's where it's at.
And then Laura Kuntz, not so much a question, but maybe you can comment on her comment. She works at an organization where she wears several hats. And so she has so many great ideas, but she gets busy making sure projects in the day-to-day are running smoothly. To channel her creativity, she is pursuing her second master's, and she's hoping her degree and dedication will move her forward in the future. If you could maybe address that balance of the day-to-day, which kind of stops you from doing brave things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Laura's calling out what a lot of leaders face, which is how much time can I spend on the strategy and creative versus the tactical execution, operational. And this is a big move for us as leaders to get really clear on our boundaries inside of the organization and protecting time, space, for that to actually happen. Because if you don't, nobody else will. And I call them the hijackers. The hijackers will come in and take my, do you have a minute of your time, Laura? I'd like you to help me with something. Well, they never mean 60 seconds ever. Right. And then, so I think, Laura, the interesting part for you to think about is, are there any boundaries that would be beneficial for you to set so that you're able to tap into that more? I love that you're doing it through this program, and I think that's amazing, but I'm wondering if there's an opportunity inside of your organization to do that as well. So I applaud you for continuing your development and dedication for that. That's awesome.
And then Keely asks, what are your top tips for inspiring bravery in others when you're still navigating and finding your own bravery?
Yeah. So Keely, here's the number one thing I would say is, people will draw bravery from you when they're watching you do it. That's the number one way to inspire it. So when you have a small, brave move that you do, people will draw bravery from you by doing that. And so I think the number one thing for you is to find out ways to practice it, right? And to practice it, because people will notice, they will pick up on it. They may not say something right away, but they will over time. And you will hear that, and you will start getting comments and feedback, and you'll go, wow, you're inspiring bravery in others by those small, brave moves that you make. So that would be my challenge for you.
Nicole, how do small, brave moves play out in how you coach?
Oh, that's a great question. So I'll tell you, for me, getting most of the leaders that I coach, there's something that's getting in the way, right? And they're trying to navigate that, whether it's a situation, a leader, a culture, an environment. And so for me, it's helping them break it down into small, brave, actionable steps, or even just what's one thing that they can do. And most often, when I talk about the stories we tell ourselves, so I coach a lot of leaders that are looking for mentors. Okay, so they're like, oh, and so, or looking for a sponsor, someone to help them because they're early on in their leadership journey. And I'll often get back from them that the thing that they tell themselves most often is, well, that executive leader is so busy, they wouldn't have time for me. How could I ever ask them to be a sponsor or a mentor to me? Yet when they ask the question, if I can get them, if I can turn up the heat and challenge them to really think about that move and making the ask and having the conversation, 99% of the time, that executive is going, they're incredibly thankful. They're like, thank you for asking me. And two, they've been looking for, that fuels them. That's part of their legacy. That's part of their giving back. But we don't always see that. And so if I can get people if I turn up the heat and get them to do the small, brave move and to practice it and to try it out, and that was just one example. I love what they come back with. And we don't always get it right the first time. So we're talking about a lot of small, brave move and success, but we're going to fall down. And I actually spent a chapter talking about falling down, making these small, brave moves. And you're going to, but that's okay. We got to pick ourselves back up and try it again.
Can you talk a little bit as well about when we see brave people, at least I do, I think sometimes, wow, they're fearless. But that's absolutely not true, because they have to have the fear in order to be brave. If they didn't have the fear, there would be nothing to be brave about.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we ought, again, I go back to the stories. We often tell ourselves, well, they have it all together. Oh, they're a published author. They own their own business. They have and they deal just like the Sheryl Sandberg and the Tom Hanks. So many people deal with everything that we're dealing with. It's just whether or not they are willing to make that, to practice it, and to give themselves permission to experiment, and to not make it, so big that it's insurmountable for us. And that's why I really focus on small, brave moves, because it's not one iconic thing that we do, but they will add up over time and prepare us for something so much more.
Your author's journey, what was the best part and the most challenging part?
Ooh, okay, my best part. Are you guys ready for this? My publisher, well, one, the interviews. The interviews were the most fun. Oh my gosh, like listening to leaders pour out their stories were incredible, including my publisher put me on a call with Tiffany Haddish. Are you guys familiar with her from Girls Trip? She is a comedian and she is hilarious. And she had just published a book, The Last Black Unicorn. And she is on there telling me, because I was struggling with one personal story that I wasn't sure whether I wanted to tell in the book or not, because most business leadership books are 100% business. Mine is actually, I love it, Michelle, highly recommend Tiffany's book. It's great. Well, I'm on a call with her and she's like, girl, these are her exact words because I wrote them down. Girl, you tell all of your story, every last bit. And I was like, you're right. Why am I putting myself in this box that it has to be? What if it's a beautiful balance of a little personal and a little business? And that for me was like, and I also had the opportunity, I don't know if anybody knows Dan Pink, but he has incredible, I had an opportunity to interview and talk with him, and more to come, but you'll see a little about him on my hardcover copy that'll be out in the next couple months. So the hardcover copy is coming next, as well as the audiobook, which I get a voice coach for, so I can say it appropriately, which I'm super pumped about.
I'm looking. I don't see if we have any more questions. If anybody does have another question, add that, because we're just about at the end of our time. Before that, though, I want to give a congratulations to our 2 door prize winners, and I'm going to have to be brave on the pronunciation of one name. Christina Pachev and Elizabeth Chentlin are going to get a copy of Nicole's book and some UNO swag. So congratulations to you. We have your contact information. We'll email you so we can get an address to send that. We've got, yep, no more questions. Also, the lapel pins. If anybody would like a UNO alumni lapel pin, please email us and we'll make sure that we get that to you as well. Don't forget the discount code. And was it Be Brave?
Yes, here, I'll put it in here real quick. Be brave. It's all one word, be brave. I'll add it in there real quick. And if you are an ebook reader, I will tell you, I do have it for $1.99 for one more week on Amazon as well. So if you enjoy Kindle, it's for $1. It's only $1.99 on there right now for another week as well. And then it'll jump up to the normal price. But if you do the Be Brave one, I'll sign up for you and get you the autographed copy.
Nice. So thanks to everyone who joined us via Zoom. If you came in late or you want to review anything that was said here today, we will post a recording of that on our YouTube page. We have a playlist for these Young Alumni Professional Series. And we encourage everyone to join us for our next Young Alumni Professional Series, which will be June 24th. And that is with Rebecca Atkins of UNO, who's going to discuss how community involvement can be a powerful networking tool. So with that, Nicole, thank you very, very much. This was great. I really, really loved it. And we're going to have to look for ways to get you in front of other UNO audiences and alumni and engage them with this great message. Everybody can use some bravery that you convey. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
With that, thanks again to everyone. Enjoy your evening and go Mavs.